Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom DeCord, and I'm very excited to have Jon Bergmann here with me today. I think he's uniquely qualified to speak on the burning subject of AI in the classroom. Now, John's been in education for decades, started teaching in 1986, which, by the way, John, is the first year that I started teaching. So we have
Wow.
that in common, and has been an award-winning teacher recognized by the White House for his excellence in science teaching. He's taught chemistry, he's taught physics, he's teaching geology. And he came to my attention. We both kind of got to know each other a little bit, maybe around 15 years ago, as John is the co-founder of the global flipped classroom movement. And as John well can tell you, became a sensation worldwide. And John took time off, 7 years in total, to kind of travel the world and spread news and understanding of the flipped classroom movement. He's taught in Illinois, worked in Colorado, and presently is in Houston, Texas, and is back in the classroom since 2019, teaching geology, right? And chemistry right now?
Geology and physics right now.
Physics right now, excuse me, physics right now. And John is revitalizing the flipped classroom movement because he sees a great connection between its value and the cognitive challenges, let me put it that way, that we're facing in today's classroom. So John, if I could we start with the flipped classroom movement? Because that's so central, I think, to trying to understand your approach to mastery learning in the
Yeah.
AI. Can you, for some who may need a little refresher or maybe don't understand some of the nuances, could you help us out?
Yeah. So way back in the day, 2007, Aaron Sams and I were teaching at a small rural school in Colorado, and we had a problem. Our kids would be missing class a lot because we're in a small rural school. And if you played on the basketball team, you hopped on a bus at noon to get to the game because bus rides were 3, 4 hours. And so we discovered some software, screen capture software, as it turned out, that would basically capture our lectures that we did in the morning so that our kids, we wouldn't constantly having to help kids get caught up. And then one day we had this crazy idea. It came from a conversation with the assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum or whatever. She came down and she said this. She said, my daughter's attending a local university and her professor is recording his lectures and she loves it. And and then she said, and we said, well, how come? And she said she loves it because she doesn't have to go to class anymore. And so at lunch later that day, Aaron and I said, wait, that was just weird. What's the value of class time if you don't go to class? And so then we said, well, wait a second. What if we figured this whole recording the lecture thing? What if we pre-recorded it and required kids watch it? And then we made class time more valuable. And so the whole idea of flipped learning was, it's really morphed into, I guess, Tom, this sort of big idea is you want to do the hard stuff in the class. Now, this is pre-AI now. Hard stuff in the class where they get the help they need. Because back in the day, right, like 2007, when we came up with this idea, our kids would go home and they're trying to do a chemistry problems. We started it was in our chemistry classes. They get stuck and they got nowhere to turn. They don't have a teacher they can ask. They don't have their parents can help them on high school chemistry. There was no place to get any help, and so they just get lost. And so we said, what is that? What if the lostness happened in the class? And so the idea is to do the hard stuff in the class, and then the information transfer, that's the easy stuff they do at home. So we recorded these cheesy videos, and now a lot of people flip with text and reading materials, but so the pre-learning in the homework space, in the independent space is the vernacular we use in the flip learning world, is that's you do the easy stuff, before class, and then the hard stuff is reserved for that in class time. So that's the
And
big idea.
that's what I was drawn to. So folks, John has written extensively in the flipped classroom and other subjects. And what really struck me is here is this opportunity for active learning in the classroom and an ability for the teacher to work individually with the students and be able to identify the issues they were having and actually address those issues immediately even.
Then
Um,
eventually we morphed that into mastery learning because then we realized that why does every kid have to be on the same page at the same time in the curriculum, right? And so kids can move through the content at and I've come up with the term. So my latest book is the Mastery Learning Handbook, and where my students move through that at a flexible pace. You can't say at their own pace because my experience with the average student, some students, if you say work at your own pace, some students won't even have a pace. So I prefer the term a flexible pace, and I put that in my definition. And so it's really morphed. And a lot of people who've done their flipped classroom have eventually moved into a mastery learning model, and that really makes a lot of sense. So
Well,
yeah,
that's actually where I wanted to jump. Okay, so let's start making that connection with AI and how mastery learning is so even more consequential than ever before. So can you first of all explain to us what you've termed the great bifurcation and why this is such a challenging time in education right now?
yeah, Tom, we are at a precipice right now. We are at a very critical juncture in the history of education. From what I've done a lot of thinking about this in the last year and a half, 2 years really, and we're going to have students. This is my prediction, and I hate that it's this way, but we're going to have students who are going to use AI as a crutch, and they're going to stupefy themselves. And I don't want to blame the students. A lot of it's their own faults as teachers. So I'm not. Don't hear me saying kids
Right.
bad. I'm not saying that at all. I am never going to say that. But those students who are allowed, if you will, to use AI as something that can do their work for them and not engage their brain, grow their synapses need to grow, all the myelin sheaths have to grow. There's physical structures that need to be built in their brain. If they don't, if they take the easy way out, then what's going to happen, and they will not thrive, I think, in the world to come. Those who use AI in a way that enhances their work are going to become the leaders of the new world. And I feel like we're going to see both outcomes happening simultaneously. And so we as educators, it is our call to make sure that we steer kids in a way that's going to help them to be thriving adults and thriving humans. Because if we let the systems that we have in place in our schools are going to send a lot of kids in a certain way. Yeah, it's our grading systems, it's our systems, it's so many things about the way school is had. I mean, a lot of the problems that I've seen over the years, especially in my crazy weird role, I have seen these problems, for many years, but now they are so enhanced and they are so amplified by AI that it's going to accelerate negative consequences for those who go in one way, and it'll amplify positive outcomes for the other side.
So we're trying to steer students towards productive struggle.
Yes,
We know that they need to do the intellectual work necessary, get the practice in, get the reps in, so that they can grow intellectually. I've always thought I mean, you can't really separate the tool from the users. I mean, you can use AI as a crutch, but you can also use AI to learn in very
100%.
authentic ways. So, how do we do this? How do we help steer our students to using AI? I know you've developed some wonderful frameworks for
Yeah.
that how teachers can approach this.
Yeah, so I mean, my story with AI started with when I said I jumped all in thinking AI is going to be this awesome thing going to transform learning. And I saw in front of me my students stupefying themselves, using it as a crutch.
Right.
So I teach a geology class, which is kind of our terminal science class at our high school. And so these kids oftentimes are not there, they're not going to go on in a science major in college or something like that, right? And then I also taught honors physics, and I saw our top students using it as a crutch. And I also saw our bottom student using a crutch. And I thought, what is wrong? We've got to figure this out.
Right.
And so I've done a lot of thinking over the last year and a half. And I kind of went into my cave this fall, and I came up with a framework that I call the MasteryFlip that has three parts to it. So part number one is AI engines. So again, there's AI in it. So it's and I call it the mastery flip. So there's a flip piece at the beginning. The students are going to get introduced to the content in a flipped classroom kind of a setting. In my case, that's primarily a video, but there's also times I'll have them read text. All right.
Mhm.
But I'm working with some outfits that are going to use AI to enhance this. Okay.
Mhm.
So I have recently stepped into, I found a tool, and then I did a keynote address at a conference in San Francisco, and lo and behold, the CEO of that company is sitting in the audience. We have dinner that night. And so I'm actually a strategic advisor for this company called Skylo.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very interesting tool in that you send a video home to a student, but it talks to you. All right. It's an AI bot that will present the material, ask you key questions, and then you respond. The students responds, and and then there is data collected, and then it's so one of the problems has always been in a flipped classroom is they can't raise their hand and say, Mr. Bergman, I don't understand about this, right? But guess what they can? They can have a conversation. It's kind of weird. It's an AI avatar of me. All right,
Mhm.
that's how I've set it up. There's other ways to do it. It's an AI avatar of me where the students can ask me, the AI, me, a question, and then I'm collecting the data back on the back end. So that's the step one where they do get to use AI to get introduced to the content that they're going to interact with in class. So that's step one.
Okay, now I was thinking of the hyper realism involved. It makes me think of Hey Gen and other providers. I
Yep.
actually practice Italian with a hyper realistic
Hmm.
tutor, and there is an element there of a different kind of connection, a different kind of relationship. So it seems like on the one hand, your students are using cutting AI, you're using cutting AI, but you're also like old school is the new school, right? So you're trying to find the balance between the paper classroom and the AI classroom. Can you explain to us how you find that balance kind of motivates you for one or the other when it comes to your instructional methods?
So the key thing that as I've shared this with teachers all over the world now, that we need to really say that, when I, talked about the flipped classroom, my students would go home and they would have cognitively complex stuff to do and they couldn't do it. But now in the age of AI, that's been flipped on its head. If I send home cognitively complex stuff, they can just ask ChatGPT to do it for them. So we can't send home the cognitively complex stuff now because so many students are going to not, they're going to cheat. And and so how do we, but if I send home a video where they have to be introduced to a content, or they read something, then that's being introduced to the content, and that's the only viable homework we can send home anymore. If you say go home and write the 5 paragraph essay,
Right.
you're dumb. I'm sorry, teacher, because too many of your kids are gonna just ask chat to write it for them. So we've got to move that hard stuff in class. So yeah, stage one, I call it the AI engine. Stage two is the analog roots.
Uh-huh.
And so if you would have walked into my class today, okay, I just got back home from school. I'm home now. And you would have seen a bunch of paper and pencil out. In my physics class, they had two things. They had to answer some circuit, we're doing circuits. They had to answer some circuit questions on paper. There was no laptops out. Our
Mhm.
kids all are issued a laptop at the beginning of school, but their laptops in their bags. And they are with paper and they're doing circuit problems. Once they did the few circuit problems, we got out these circuit boards and they built a circuit. And then they had to yeah. And in my geology class, we had maps. We were discussing El Nino today, so they watched a video on El Nino, the AI engine bit Pete last night, and then they were drawing maps, heat maps of the ocean temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, and then they were going to they it was very obvious what was going on, that the temperature shifts and da da da. So that was that piece. That's stage two. So stage one is the AI engine. Stage two is the analog route. So I've gone back to paper and pencil and high brain, low tech.
You know what?
So
What struck me too, I was watching your video, the easy button is destroying student cognition, and you had students building trebuchets. Now,
yeah.
like I'm a former history teacher, right? So I'm thinking Middle Ages. Oh yeah, trebuchets. They would launch that to try to knock down the walls and medieval period and storm the castle kind
Mhm.
of thing. And the kids, that must have been a hoot for them. It must have been a
Oh,
riot. But they have to defend. They would be interviewed by you, right? They would have to
right.
defend the physics behind the construction of their trebuchet, right?
Yeah. So that's the third pillar. The third
Uh-huh.
pillar which I'm not the first one to say this. Stephen Bouchard, who is big into the sort
Yeah.
of social studies world, and he's a debate coach. I think that's where the idea sort of seeded from me. And I call the third part the Mastery Viva, or the human check, where now the students then have to do a verbal, like 2 minute assessment. In the case of the Trebuchet project that you're referring to, that was a summative assessment. So I spent 7 to 10 minutes grilling each kid on the physics of their trebuchet and explaining why it did, what happened and all this kind of stuff. But what happens even today is I was walking around the room in my geology class. I said, all right, explain to me what you understand about this aspect of El Nino. And so each kid is having this 2 to 3 minute sort of very focused little conversation with me. I'm walking around with a paper clipboard and I'm checking off if I like their conversation. I
Mhm.
went to one group or one kid, and oftentimes I'll group them. And I said they couldn't give me an adequate explanation. I said, well, you got to figure it out. Goodbye. I mean, you don't have the answer. You haven't sufficiently figured this out, so you've got to do this. Now, the way that looked in the physics class today was they built their circuit, and I said, all right, you're an electron. I want you to trace the electron. All right, it's going through this. What is this thing right here? It's a resistor, Mr. Bergman. What does a resistor do? Some kids, I don't know. I said, well, then figure it out. I'll be back. But if they had to say something like, well, it slows the electrons down because it is made of a metal alloy. They had to kind of explain some things that was
Right.
explained in their video. So, and also, but they're actually physically got this little thing with a light bulb turned on that they're having. And so they're having this tiny little 2 minute conversation with me, and I'm roaming on the room having lots of little 2 minute conversations. I walk around and talk to kids. That's my job. It's
All
awesome.
right. So we've got the three elements here. In the video, I mean, we're talking a lot about different rappers
Yeah.
and the role that they play. So we're sort of back a little bit in the AI realm here and rappers. Can you explain what you mean by that and these
Yeah.
different types of rappers that you incorporate?
Yeah, so this keynote that I delivered in San Francisco at the Learning the Brain conference
Mhm.
was in San Francisco. And I think of all the places I can talk about this, I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley and or close to it. And I want AI companies to hear me. We need a new learning OS. Because here's the problem with AI. AI was built for efficiency and for businesses. It wasn't built for education. Education needs productive struggle. Students need friction to learn. And so we need to build our systems in a way, and I called it wrappers. We need some wrappers around AI that preserves the productive struggle and yet and takes into mind what we know about what learning is. Okay, and that hasn't been built yet. So I'm calling that we need a learning OS. And if I recall, and that's been I have it somewhere else in my notes, but I talk about the fundamental things that have to be built in. Number one, productive struggle, right? Number two, we need to have it to be longitudinal so that I can look at the data from the students. And then I talked about specific features I want in these AI tools. So interesting conversation. So now I'm this advisor for this company, Skylo.ai. And I was on yesterday about this time, I was talking to the CEO and or founder and Henry and and we were talking about how to build this out. And I said, here's the thing that I'm worried about. He says, so when a kid responds to the thing, the AI Jon Bergmann asks a question of the student about the physics concept. I said, can they type or talk? And he said, either or. I said, here's my concern. I said, here's what I have seen happen with my students. They're going to go to ChatGPT, copy and paste, and put the answer in. I don't want that. He
Right.
said, oh, we're fixed that. It's just on the fly. I mean, especially with vibe coding. He said, we're just not going to allow pasting. I said, done, perfect. I mean, these are the kinds of
Yeah.
things. So I said, because I'm this advisor, I said, we've got to build the productive struggle in because I need the students' brains to work. Now, could they go to ChatGPT and then read it back? Sure. But at least there's still more brain engagement than, AI asks you a question and then you go get chat to answer. Because I want to have that interaction built in. So we've got to build those kinds of things into our AI. And so I have a list of, I forget now, 7 wrappers that I say we need to put onto our AI in a way that's going to help. And it's not just AI, it's we need to build a better system technologically And so a lot of the things I asked for don't exist, but I wish they do.
Yeah, I know
So,
in the easy button video you were talking about what would be sort of the ideal tool, right? They could
right.
do A, B, C, D, and this you are basically expressing them in terms of wrappers that you
Yeah.
wish existed. So we don't have the ideal tool. And sometimes I think we forget that for the tech giants, right? They're all geared towards giving us the answer instantaneously.
Right.
They're not geared towards producing obstacles and struggles and intellectual challenges for the users. I was reading an interview of a Google DeepMind AI an education expert saying, yeah, I mean, this is AI tutoring has so much potential, but we're
But it's
struggling.
too quick to
We're
give
kind of
the answer.
struggling to create this.
Yeah. It's so quick to give the answer, and that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, there AI wants to give the answer, you know. Don't do that. I mean, I'm using AI as like my chief of staff. I use Gemini. And so I've uploaded a whole bunch of data but one of the instructions in my it's like kind of a big Google Gym and I'll say, dude, you need to not always agree with me. Okay. I need you to fight me. I need you to, if you see any flaw in my thinking, I need you to come back to me and tell me what you're seeing. So, I mean, you've got to build those things. And that's the idea of this wrapper. Build that productive struggle into your tools for these education facing tools,
Yeah,
right?
you can't bring, as you say, you can't bring a forklift
Yeah.
into the gym, as you mentioned in your
Yeah.
video. I mean, because you're not getting the workout, you're not doing the
Right.
reps, you're not doing the
I
practice,
mean, people
you're not
grow
struggling.
by struggle, right? I was at the weight room this morning. The only way I'm going to get better is if I either do more reps or I lift more weight. That's the only way I'm going to get stronger, right? And so that's and people need those reps. Yeah, yeah. Bringing a forklift to the weight room. I mean, my students have figured this out, right? They're not dumb. They know there's agentic AI, and if you put an assignment on Canvas, and you can just use an agentic AI and say, go into Canvas, here's my login information, and do my work.
Right.
That's there's videos on kids doing that now. So we got to bring that struggle back in. We've got to design our schools, our classrooms in a way that preserves that productive struggle. But you can't trust that if you just hey do this at home, there you can't do that anymore. But that's where I mean I say it's revitalization of flipped learning because for them to be introduced to a concept before they come to class is not a huge ask. And even if they were to use AI and ChatGPT to teach them how to do circuits in my physics class today, and they didn't watch a video of me doing it, I don't care. They've been introduced to the concept and they come in prepared to learn.
So, I'm listening to you, and you build in elements of AI and progressive ed tech integration. On the other hand, you're very much grounded in basics and what many would call kind of old school
Yeah.
tactics. It seems to me so much we have this polarization, it's an either or. We're going to ban AI or we're
Yep.
going to make AI schools. And it seems to me you're trying to find out what the correct balance is. You've thought about this carefully. You have a framework and model. How about those teachers who are struggling themselves to try to find that middle ground? When teachers come up to you and start asking you questions of, well, how do I approach this? Where do I begin? What do you tell them?
I guess my number one thing is you can't send home the hard stuff. So what are you going to do? I teach at a high performing school. At a high performing school, we expect a lot of our kids. And if that's the case, if you're going to send homework home, what are you going to do? I mean, the only answer is some kind of a flipped thing. I can't see anything else, to be honest with you. I mean, and it's not just me. I was invited to an AI summit at the what it's called Rockefeller Center in New York this fall, and it was Jon Bergmann and 12 college professors. So these were all higher ed STEM teachers, nuclear engineers, mechanical engineers, coding experts. I think the guy from Michigan had the largest MOOC of coding classes in the world with 1 million students or something. Fascinating guy. It was great. And they all basically said, yeah, we've got to flip our classes. We don't see any other way, because they have bigger problems, honestly, in higher ed. because they don't see their students as many hours a day as I do, or a week or whatever.
Right.
So I'm not sure I have the complete answer there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But so I guess that's my message to them. And I think the framework, teachers need something simple. And I think three steps: AI engines, analog roots, Mastery Vivas. I think that's the Mastery Vivas, or the Mastery, the little interviews is really been the game changer for me. And I've done these kinds of things and I talk about in the Mastery Handbook. I've done these sort of mini conversations, but I'm making them much more intentional now, in this framework, and it really is making a huge difference. Because, yeah, there's been some complaints, I think, online when I've talked about this. Is like, well, how do I get to 30 kids? Well, you got to clump them. And if you go to my podcast, the Reach Every Student podcast, reacheverystudent.com, is that I have like little 7 to 10 minute podcast episodes where I talk about these different things. So how do you do this if you get a large class? And what do I do? And there's some other techniques. I use another tool, an AI tool, that if I don't get to a kid, the AI can do the mastery check for them, and I can listen to the audio file, and I do that. So there's a lot of other little tips on sort of how to make this work in reality with like real kids in classes like that I have to deal with. And so I hope my voice, as just another teacher like they are trying to figure this out, helps
So
them.
there's obviously huge implications for assessment, and we have to start to reimagine
Yep.
assessment. There are some that advocating for a much stronger emphasis on formative assessment and much less on summative assessment. I was listening to your talk, and you were explaining even how you were balancing assessment, even percentages. Now, it was a particular project, but how are you going ahead and thinking and balancing formative with summative assessment?
That's a good question. I mean, my school is still pretty heavy on summative assessments, and I'm not 100% against summative assessments, because in a summative assessment, what's a locked, I mean, my tests are all on a computer, but they're on a lockdown browser. It's really impossible for them to cheat. I've checked all their phones into a phone thing, and so it's really hard for them to cheat. I don't really think they are anymore. They used to, because we didn't have the lockdown browser. But so I'm not against a traditional test in the sense, but I am bringing in the interviews. But like on a big project, like I said on the trebuchet, what you're referring to, I downgraded the paper that they wrote because I knew that they would use AI to make a shortcut. But then I upgraded, if you will, the interview, the Socratic interview, that I
Mhm.
think was super powerful. So those are the kinds of things. So I made it more than the written paper. And there also was they had to actually build this thing, and that was a percentage of the grade too. They had to build this trebuchet that actually worked. So
Okay.
I created, I don't know if you had a chance to see this, but I had 3 of my podcast episodes where I actually interviewed the kids, and I got permission from their parents and from them to interview. And I posted, I don't know, 6 or 7 of those interviews, or at least excerpts of them, 2 and 3 minute little excerpts of my students. And if you go to my Substack, or just the reacheverystudent.com, which is the podcast, you'll find those episodes where I talk about, and you get to see what my students did and what those interviews looked like. So.
Terrific. Now, I'm wondering too, we're in the age of agentic AI, and there are teachers who have seen videos of students using agents to enter into the LMS and complete assignments on their behalf, and which is, of course, bringing a level of complexity and challenge and issues of security,
Right.
authenticity, whatnot with it. So, what do you see happening? If I could ask you to sort of look in the crystal ball in the next few years, in terms of agentic AI, or just the evolution, or I shouldn't say the revolution, of AI capacities right now, and how that's going to impact you personally in the classroom, and broadly how it may impact the whole education community.
Well, I know one thing, Tom, I'm telling my students. So I teach all juniors and seniors in high school. So the college is right on the cusp. As I said, what I read is happening in the world right now is that companies are hiring less graduates, high school, college graduates, because AI agents are taking their place. And I said, here's the reality. You've got to be that kid, and Actually, I had this conversation with a colleague today who's at the top of the class, but I don't mean the top of the class in terms of you've got the highest GPA, but somebody who really could use these tools to enhance yourself because that entry level job that you get right out of college is being replaced by these AI agents. And so this is my warning to my students. Actually, number one warning is choose your major carefully because some majors won't exist, right? There's some jobs that AI agents are going to be really, really good at. And so you probably don't want that major. Number two, you need to be the top of your class, someone who knows how to use AI to learn. I mean, this conversation with this colleague today, he's the head of our digital learning program, and is we've got to get, we need to create, if you will, some sort of a course or build this into our courses where it's almost like back in the day, there were a lot of teachers in the early part of the flipped classroom movement who were doing Genius Hour,
Mhm.
where kids would get 20% of their time to explore whatever they want. But now with AI, what I really want my students to learn how to do is find something they're passionate about, teach themselves, build their own tutors, gyms, whatever, agentic AI that's going to help them become an expert about whatever, right? And because if they know how to use AI to teach them how to do whatever's next, they will be so far ahead of students who have just, walked through a very specific prescribed curriculum in their university because they'll be so narrow focused because universities will not adapt in the next 4 years. Some will, but yet it'll be the exception. And so and this is my heart. These are my kids, right? I want them to be the ones successful. They're going to have to find that route in where they can use this to learn anything they want. Because, I mean, what's the value of college education to some degree if I can learn anything I want? But they've got to have that sort of willpower that says, I'm going to use AI to learn these things so that I can then, you know, be that leader in the world that I want to be in. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
is
I'm not
that
sure if that's answering your question, but yeah.
well, that emotional part is so intrinsic to everything. In other
Yeah.
words, we can create the conditions through which students can learn in a productive way through intellectual friction,
Yeah.
but we can try to engender the conditions in which they love learning and want to learn more. If that element is missing, as you say, they go to college, that element is missing, and I'm afraid of the consequences. I'm
Yeah.
afraid that they're using that easy button.
Yeah. Well,
Hey, I
and
just
there's some
oh
research. I don't know. I just that kids are all. What was in the article in? Was it the New Yorker or the Times or I don't know, or Journal, whatever. Basically saying all the kids are cheating their way through college,
yeah, I
and
think there was a New York Times article. Yeah, yeah,
it was the Times. Yes, it was, and
yeah.
it was that's terrifying. So, uh, and the professors weren't ready, and they still aren't. So, what's the value of that piece of paper then, right? They're going to get at the end. I mean, but those who will use it in a way that will enhance their learning, oh, they're going to become the next Steve Jobs, the next, whatever, so that
Mhm.
kind of a thing. And so, how do we prepare kids for that? So, and there are many go-getters like this company I keep referring back to, Skylo. Um, the CEO is 26 years old. So he's younger than my youngest child. So, uh, you know, it,
You know,
it, so these guys are developing this as a passion project, if you will, and are building a company, in Silicon Valley, totally, so there are people who will, win in this world, so to speak. And I want my kids to be those who win, I guess.
it's interesting you mentioned Stephen Bouchard earlier, and I read his Substack column.
Mhm.
And yes, you have former social science teacher, debate coach. And in a recent article, he was highlighting teenagers who are using agents, developing solutions, programs, companies,
Yeah.
addressing various medical issues or scientific issues. And it's just outstanding what
hmm
what these young people are able to accomplish. But
Which is
it's
going back to the old school, right? It's like
yeah, it's going
the
back to the
old
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 school. Yeah.
school was Socrates giving oral exams because there was paper was too expensive.
Right.
But in the midst of that, he's preserving their brains, right? So yeah, yeah, it's old school, not old school, but old school to go back to Socrates, right?
Hey, John, this has been great. This has been
Yeah.
fascinating. It's great to catch up. For me, it brings back memories of, edtech teacher conferences that we would organize and you would speak. And it's just wonderful to be able to connect with you again. And you are uniquely positioned. What tremendous experience you have, both in the classroom and also as one of our finest edtech leaders, and helping us forge our way in this difficult, precarious period of AI infusion. Hey, so how can people get in touch with you? They want to follow up. They want to know more about your theories, your program services. How can they reach you?
Reacheverystudent.com. Just go there and you'll find all my stuff. So there's links to my Substack. Once you go to reacheverystudent.com, you'll get everywhere you go need. So
Awesome. So again, hey, it's very, very kind of you and generous to
mhm.
to share this time with me, and I'm sure our viewers are appreciating it as well. So thank you so much, John, and I hope
Yeah,
we have a chance to do this again in the future. Thank you.
awesome. Nice talking, Tom.